It gives me my great pleasure now to introduce a friend of mine and someone who is a huge influence on all of us in this community. I'm going to actually read you his bio because you don't know him like I know him. Congressman Elijah Cummings was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, where he still resides today. As a matter of fact, he's right here in front of me. He obtained his bachelor's degree in political science from Howard University. Yeah, go Howard. Serving as student government president and graduating Phi Beta Kappa. I wouldn't have thought anything less from you. And then graduated from the University of Maryland School of Law. Congressman Cummings also received 11 honorary doctorate degrees so far, that is. He's dedicated his life to the service of uplifting and empowering the people he is sworn to represent. He began his career of public service in the Maryland House of Delegates, where he served for 14 years and became the first African American in Maryland history to be named Speaker Pro Tem. Since 1996, Congressman Cummings has proudly represented Maryland's 7th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He currently serves as the ranking member of the Committee on Oversight. And the thing you need to know about this wonderful individual is that he has served tirelessly to really try to create a society where injustice is not present. He advocates for all the underserved, particularly working on education. He's a huge supporter of our Orchestra program, and he's absolutely a model citizen and one of my heroes. Please welcome Elijah Cummings.
Thank you, Maestra. It is indeed my honor and my privilege to be here, and I want to thank you, Southside, for your leadership. When I was watching the film, tears began to well up in my eyes. I'm a man who don't mind telling people I cry. And, you know, it is amazing. As I was sitting there, I couldn't help but think about all the things that our orchestra here has done to make sure that when children hear the words orchestra and symphony, they realize that it's not some foreign country or entity. And I want to thank you for your leadership. I really mean that. You have placed your fingerprints on generations yet unborn to make a difference. Give her a hand, please. I came by here, this is the first time in my 34 years of public service where I asked to come and speak somewhere. I just left a gathering with President Clinton, and we are in the middle of, I don't know if you know this, but we are in the middle of dealing with something called Benghazi. I'm the top Democrat on that committee. I'm also the top Democrat on the drafting of the Democratic Committee platform. But when I was leaving President Clinton a few minutes ago, before he even had a chance to speak, he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to meet with some orchestra people." And in typical Clinton style, he said, "What's up with that?" And what I told him was I wanted to come by because this wonderful organization had decided that it would have a conference around and would look at the whole issue of how to make sure that all of our children, all of our people were a part of what they do. Ladies and gentlemen, I have come by here to tell you what you already know, that our diversity is not our problem, it is our promise. A few days ago, I was at Marin's house where we were trying to raise some money for orchids. And there are moments in your life that cause you to reflect back on other significant moments of your life. Anybody been there? And isn't it amazing that you can, a lot of times when you hear an old song or you hear a speech or whatever, and you go back and you think about how you felt 50 years ago or 30 years ago, you can gin up the same feelings. And as I sat there and I listened to the maestro and others, I could not help but think about myself as a little boy in this city. Little boy, some 50-some years ago, grew up not too far from here. Literally, you could have walked to my house in 5 minutes from where we're sitting right here. In a segregated city, growing up with two wonderful parents, neither one of whom had more than a third-grade education. And my father and mother had come to Baltimore from South Carolina when they got married at 18. And they came to Baltimore from South Carolina for one reason, because they wanted to make sure that their children had a chance to get an education that they did not have a chance to get. And they did it, they moved before we were even born. But I will never forget my father struggling with 7 children. All I wanted to do was be in the band. There was a street band that would go up and down the street on the 4th of July and Memorial Day and all the major holidays, and I would watch them from the side, and I was so excited, and I wanted, when the time came, I just wanted to be in the band. But being in the band, you had to rent your horn for 35 cents a year. And my father didn't have it. And so I remember standing on the sidelines. I can still remember the tune that they seemed to play over and over again. It went something like this, because they did the same thing over and over. And I just wanted to be able to be in the band. And so for all these years, I've been wanting to be in the band. And when I was sitting there listening to people talk about raising money so that little children could have the opportunity that I did not have, and so that they would not have to mourn what could have been, What could have been? Never know. I could have been up there in an orchestra myself. The maestro would be pointing at me, giving me a solo. And so, orchids and so many other types of programs are so important. The arts are so important. I never got my horn. You didn't hear that. The maestro said, I'm going to get it. Thank you. But let me just tell you something. Ladies and gentlemen, in so many of our cities, as I watched the film, I could not help but think about, I live in that neighborhood. I live there. I have lived there for 35 years. And over again, I see young people who simply want to belong to something. They simply want to belong. And a lot of times in the neighborhoods, in many neighborhoods like those that you saw on the screen, children don't even know what normal is. For so many of you, you take it for granted that your child will learn an instrument or will have a music teacher. Will have a music teacher. Will be able to visit the orchestra, the symphony. First time I ever went to a symphony, I was 25 years old. And that was because I was trying to date. Amen. And so, I beg you, I would come asking, but I come begging. You to do what you are doing in this conference, putting a spotlight on incorporating all of us in what you do, and making sure that all folks, everybody, has an opportunity to be a part. I'll tell you two last things and then I'm going to go. During the disturbances, I made it my business to try to keep people calm, because I realized that if there was one shot fired in Baltimore, that the whole city might blow up. And so I would be in Washington casting votes, and then I would rush home by 9 o'clock so that I could get on the corner of Penn and North to encourage people to go home before the curfew, encourage the police not to act in a negative way, and trying to get cooperation. But I should never forget one night, the first night that I arrived on that corner. I dashed from D.C., went to the corner, and there was a fella on the corner who I knew. He was, and I had a theory. Well, you had all these people in the corner. A lot of them wanted to get arrested, and I wanted to make sure they didn't. But I had a theory that if I went to the person who was making the most noise and seemed to be the leader, that might be the best way of helping calm the situation. And so this one particular night, I went to the corner, and this guy, he was cursing and jumping up and down, and he was so angry, he was just really upset. And I knew him because he was one of the guys in my neighborhood. You know, and before I left Washington, I saw him on CNN. So I got here, and I went up to him, and I said, I asked him what he was going to do. Man, Mr. Cummings, I'm getting arrested tonight, man. And he was saying, cursing and everything. And I said, but don't you have children? He said, yeah, I have 2 children. I said, how old are your children, 2 and 5? I said, well, who's going to take care of your children if you're in jail? He said, well, my baby's mama, she's going to take care of them until 9:30. I said, well, if you get arrested at 10, who's going to take care of him? So anyway, he cursed and cursed and cursed and cursed. And then I did something. My spirit told me, put your arms around him. I put my arms around him and I said, I love you. And he backed off from me and he said, as tears began to run down his face, he said, Mr. Cummings, you're the first man that ever told me he loved me. He said, I'm 25 years old. And then, Maestra, this is where the arts came in. My spirit said, and he was still a little belligerent, so as we began to try to get people off the corner, my spirit said, it's time for some music. And I began to sing, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And I'm trying to march people off the corner, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. As you can see, I'm not the greatest singer. But next thing I knew, I looked over, and there he was. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And he became a part of the leadership. Why? For two things. I showed him respect. I saw him as a human being who had phenomenal potential. And every night after that, he came 5 nights in a row and came up to me and said, Congressman Cummings, reporting for duty. Reporting for duty. You may not think what you're doing is significant, but it is significant. It was a teacher who told me in the 8th grade who Rudolph Nureyev was. In my neighborhood, Rudolph, who? Of course, he was a ballet guy, right? From Russia, right. And so I came to appreciate ballet because somebody came to my school when I was in the 8th grade and introduced us to Rudolph Nureyev. But I can tell you, in my neighborhood, most people don't know who he is, 99%. But again, it became a part of who I am. It allowed me to be able to appreciate the arts. Remember what I said? In some neighborhoods, folk don't even know what normal is. In the 6th grade, we had a wonderful teacher who took us to a place not far from here called Sherwood Gardens. I didn't even know it was that many beautiful flowers in the world, but somebody took an interest in me, and they realized that we needed to be exposed to these wonderful things in the world. And that's why, when I visited orchids and watched those little kids talk about composers that I'd never heard of, talked about how they loved it and how it made them feel, it simply reminded me of when my daughter went to the School for the Arts here in Baltimore. She came home one day, I'm closing now. She came home one day and she said, Daddy, I got something to tell you. And every parent in here knows that you hate to think that your child don't like the school. She came and she said, Daddy, I just got something to tell you. She put her head down. She said, Daddy, this is the most wonderful thing. This school is the most wonderful thing that has ever happened to me. I said, why is that? She said, I always knew that there was a part of me that was like right up here, Daddy, but I couldn't get it out. And now I'm in this school and I'm able to let it out. And it makes me feel so much better about myself. And so she just graduated. I knew there's some Howard people in the room. She just graduated from Howard University about 2 weeks ago, doing fine. As I close, I just wanted to come by and emphasize to you how important what you do is. As I march towards the twilight of my life, there's nothing more important to me than seeing children have opportunities, seeing them be exposed to the world, giving them a chance to know what normal is. Reminds me of my mother-in-law, who had breast cancer. She died in September. She was one of the most brilliant human beings I ever met. And I consider her one of my best friends. She produced 3 of the most brilliant children that I've ever met. And she was a former teacher. And her name was Hazel. So Hazel had been sick for about 3 months. I'm almost finished. You're looking a little nervous. See, in my neighborhood, you don't miss a fly. I'm just messing with you. So there Hazel is, knowing that she's about to die. And she called a meeting. Said, I just want to meet with the family. And I was hoping that for that moment, she wouldn't include me. She said, you got to be in here. And they began to talk about her funeral. That's what she wanted to meet about. And Maestra, as she began to talk about her funeral, the first thing she said is, I don't want a funeral. So I don't want a funeral. She said, I want a memorial service. And we said, but wait a minute, hold on. You've been the head of the NAACP. You've been the head of the Democratic Party. You've been in your county. You've been a teacher. You've been a GI counselor. I mean, come on. You've been a substitute teacher. You've done all these wonderful things. People will want to come. She said, no, I don't want a funeral. I said, why, Mother? Why don't you want a funeral? She said, I don't want you spending money on no limousine. I raised y'all so y'all got a car? You drive your own car. She said, all I want you to do is get me the cheapest casket that you can find and bury me graveside. You can have a memorial service you want. She said, I would like to be cremated, but I think it would be cheaper, but that's too close to hell. I don't think I want to. But we asked the question, why, Mother? Why? She said, because I want you to take that money. And she said, tell them not to send me any flowers. This former teacher, counselor of GIs after they got back from war, sat there and sat up in her bed and said, I want you to establish a scholarship fund so the children who cannot afford to go to college can have that opportunity. So, ladies and gentlemen, what she was doing was creating a path for people to get, and young people to get to a brighter future. And the reason why I left Bill Clinton, the reason why I put down my duties for a moment in addressing the platform for the Democratic Party, the reason why I put aside the Benghazi Committee is because I wanted to come here
to first of all thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. I came here at number 2 to make you realize how significant it is. Number 3, I came here simply to encourage you to continue to do what you are doing. May God bless.